What's up? All right. My name is Bevan.
This is Alexa.
And we are about to do a CFI mock oral exam for your CFI check ride.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah.
All right. So let's go. Okay, Alexa, we're just going to assume all the paperwork and everything's out of the way. We've reviewed the maintenance records, your IACRA and everything. So now we're going to get started on your actual oral exam.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like for you to do is in the Certified Flight Instructor, Single Engine Airplane, PTS, do Area 1 and present task B, E, and G to me. That's out of Area 1.
All right.
Okay?
B, E, and G.
B, E, and G.
I'll share my notes.
Then after that, we'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll prepare for Area 2.
Okay.
Okay? But if at any point, if you need any other breaks, then just let me know.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so area operations, Area 1, Task B is the learning process. Number 1, learning theory. This is how people acquire skills over time. They have different types of the learning theory. So we have like behaviorism, that's the carrot and the stick, the dog treat to reinforce positive behaviors, which is good. So that's kind of how behaviorism works with that. Cognitive theory, this is what's going on inside the mind, kind of like the FOI. Group as a whole, this is how we categorize things in our head and store them based on that. And that kind of goes into the information processing theory. We use our 5 senses to retract information and store it accordingly based on our perception and insight. And we'll go into that a little bit later on as well. Constructivism, this is building blocks. You learn things better over time as you build and build and build. It just builds on top of each other, the known to the unknown type learning. And moving on to perceptions and insight. What is a perception? Perception is how you gather information and think about an experience in a certain way. My perceptions, even though we might see the same thing, will differ from how you perceive something based on our previous life experience. In those perceptions, we use our 5 senses to gather information. That's sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell. This gives meaning to the certain stimuli and it's shaped from, again, past events. As instructors, it's right for us to gather the right perception for the student. So when you're doing like power on, power off stalls, maybe a few lessons in, you want to tell them, this isn't a bad thing. This just means, hey dummy, look at your airspeed, lower the nose, recover. You're not going to fall out of the sky, which they might think right away, which could be a fear as well. Physical organism, this is the student or the instructor who is creating this perception using your 5 senses. There's different types of perceptions and how you can incur those senses, so goals and values. Someone who's working towards a private pilot might work less hard than someone that's actually in this for a career goal. So keep that in mind when you're instructing students. Ask what is their end goal of this and try to hold them to the same standard all across the board. Obviously you can't get perfection out of every student, but you want to try. Self-concept, this is how they perceive themselves. Are they confident? If they're confident, they're going to be confident. If they're insecure, they're probably going to be insecure about flight training. So try to praise them.
No, it's okay, you're good. Let me just
try to praise them and keep their overall morale up.
hold on a second. Okay, there. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that. That was distracting.
Time and opportunity. This is if the student has the time dedicated to flight instruction or learning or the opportunity. So time, I would say roughly 2 flights a week would be a substantial amount of time to allocate towards flight training to move forward. Anything less than that, you're not really going to get anything out of the lesson. You're just going to be going through the motions, and you can't even remember what you did last week, you know. Opportunity, this can be like something like money. When I first started, I didn't know where to go and get money from. So Tom, my instructor, really helped me out to figure out a way in order to afford this, really make this possible for me. Element of threat. This is like fear can inhibit perceptions as well. If they're scared of the stall warning horn, they're not going to focus on anything other than that fear. So you are wasting your time explaining things and wasting their time. You want to inform the student to get them over that fear so they can perceive fully. And this kind of goes into insight as well. These are the groupings of perception into meaningful wholes. So we get insight from certain experiences. Again, everyone's different. And you'll form perceptions based on what you think. Any questions on that?
No, that's actually perfect so far. It's everything I've got that you needed to mention.
Okay. Moving on to acquiring knowledge, and there's an acronym for this. So there's memorization, understanding, and concept learning. Memorization's a great way to get the student started. You can memorize something, but you don't actually know the meaning behind that. So in flight training, when you first start out, there's so much information to learn. Sometimes it's better to memorize it and then come around and try to develop a scenario where you can fully understand what you're trying to say to the student. This could also be hurtful too, because if they don't understand what you're saying, you can't possibly talk about task B without completely understanding task A. Understanding, this is putting two and two together. They can relate concepts and relationships and fully understand how one affects the other. Moving on to concept learning. Concept learning is kind of like building block learning again. To get to point B, you have to know what point A means. And an example of this would be a student taxiing out to spot 5, getting their ATC clearance to go VFR to the north. They might be all foobarred and mumble jumbled up because they don't know what to expect. Versus someone like me or you that's working on our CFI rating, we know what to expect. Okay, probably 1500, 35.3, squawk 03, whatever. So you put these concepts together and just build and build and build. So that's acquiring skill knowledge. Moving on to the laws of learning. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay.
So far, so good.
Laws of learning, and there's an acronym for this as well. You can use the acronym REAPER. A Swiss psychologist developed the first 3 letters of this. His name was E.L. Thorndike. He developed these laws of learning.
Was he Swiss?
Yeah.
I thought he was an American psychologist. Was I wrong?
I read it in the book and it said Swiss.
Did
and
it?
King John said Swiss.
Well, I believe you.
Oh. Okay.
He didn't say anything when I said it, so.
Yeah. Okay, so E.L. Thorndike came up with these laws of learning in order for the student to fully perceive the lesson or the task at hand, whatever you may be doing.
He was American.
He was? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So R is readiness, E is effect, and exercise. Oops. Primacy, intensity, and recency. The first law of readiness, this just goes based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid. E.L. Thorndike kind of went against that and said they don't need to learn it or be ready in this sequential order as long as they are ready as a whole. So, did they get enough sleep last night? Did they drink too much the night before? Are they stressed out? Things like that. Are you actually ready to go out on the plane and learn? They need to be ready in order to do that. Law of effect. This is positive experience. It is reinforced, again, with the carrot and the stick thing, behaviorism. You want to reinforce the positives to keep them coming back. Flying is supposed to be enjoyable. So you want to keep the positive lightheartedness of flight training for the student. The law of exercise, this just goes based on like use it or lose it. If you don't use something in a long period of time, you're probably not going to remember it. So just keep information fresh, flowing, change up the pace, go over things a couple times. Primacy, this is the law of whatever's learned first is learned best. It is really hard to unteach a student something that you did wrong. So you want to make sure that you taught them the right way the first time. Otherwise, they're going to go back to the bad habits that maybe another instructor taught them or you taught them. So it's very hard to unteach someone something. Intensity, this is just vivid impressions. Trying to teach a student how to do a pre-flight. If you're using a diagram or a picture, they're probably going to doze off within the first 2-3 minutes of explaining what a pre-flight is. So you want to make a vivid impression for them to remember, maybe going out to the actual airplane and, okay, this is the landing leg, these are the ailerons, things like that, because vivid impressions will stick. Recency, this is the most recent is best remembered. So, for example, today me and Tom went out and we did power off 180s. I best remember how to do a power off 180 and the technique for that certain day. So that's that with the laws of learning. Any questions on that?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. Moving on to domains of learning. This is developed by Dr. Bloom, and I work at Outback, so I think Bloom onions. I'm gonna say that too.
Yeah, I think you should.
So the domains of learning, there's 3 different domains. You want to teach thorough through all stages of these domains. You don't want to leave no stone unturned to really convey that message or the lesson, whatever you're trying to teach your student. So the first one is cognitive theory. This is what's going on inside the brain again, kind of like the FOI. And there's a acronym for that. RUAC, wrote, understanding, application, correlation. So rote, again, is kind of like memorization, scratch pad memory. They're not going to remember it for long. There's a limited capacity to what you could possibly memorize. So something rote would be VX in this airplane is 65. They can spit it right back at you, but they don't understand a lick of what it means. And then you want to go into understanding. You want them to understand what VX actually means. Okay, well, in a short field takeoff, we're going to use VX to get our best angle of climb, right? To clear our 50-foot obstacle. That's what VX means.
Yeah.
So you want to go into that with them. And application is actually going out and doing a short field takeoff. So you're going to, rotate at 50, transition to VX in this airplane, 65. That's actually going out and applying those skills that you just went over. And then correlation is actually going to a short field runway or airport and doing a short field takeoff. For example, in Matilla.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually applying the skill that you just learned. The next domain is affective domain. The student and the plane has feelings. They are people. Treat others as you wish to be treated. Obviously, you want to have a stance on criticism and stuff, but at the end of the day, they have feelings. You want to be funny and make flying fun, appeal to their positive reinforcement, things like that. Moving on to psychomotor. This is just muscle memory. If you can turn and talk at the same time, the practice helps with this as well. It creates habits and imitations almost. You can chair fly at home, the same maneuver you might be learning in the plane. That would be a domain of psychomotor. And that is it for domains of learning. Any questions on that?
No, the only thing I can add to that is that you want to mention that you can, you want to appeal to all 3 of those domains of learning as much as possible. The cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. Because all 3 of them really help it just kind of click together.
Yeah.
You can't just be doing psychomotor. You can't just be doing cognitive.
Effective, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure you appeal to all 3 as much as possible.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
That's it, though.
Moving on to characteristics of learning. What is this? Characteristics of learning, we can use the acronym PIMA. Is it purposeful? Experience? Multifaceted? I believe this is active process.
Yes.
It is active process. Okay. Characteristics of learning. Purposeful, you don't want to just go out there and tell them to do something without them knowing why you're doing it. So why is learning power-up stalls important, or why is learning this task important? So you want to bring meaning to what they're learning so they fully understand. Experience. This is like the building blocks of learning, what the student does in order to learn. You can talk about short field takeoffs all you want, but until you go out and practice them, you don't actually understand what is going on, and that's through experience. Multifaceted, this is just different techniques that you can convey your message to the learner. So right now I'm using the board to convey this message to you. You can use videos, you can use diagrams, you can use a plane in real life to convey your message. Active process, you want to involve the student when you're talking to them. If you do like a lecture type method, they might not be paying attention more than 5 minutes into the lecture. So you want to ask questions, make topics interesting, involve them in order for them to fully learn. And that is it for characteristics of learning. Do you have any questions?
No, that was good.
Okay. Moving on to acquiring skill knowledge. This is like riding a bike. Practice makes perfect, right? Once you learn how to ride a bike, you're not going to unlearn how to ride a bike. And cognitive kind of goes by this. This is the step-by-step thinking process of the brain. This requires their full attention in order to learn. And moving on to associative, this is cause and effect. This is when you can put 2 and 2 scenarios together. Okay, well, when we turn, we're going to lose our vertical component of lift, right? So you got to add some power. That would be a cause and effect type situation. And moving on to automatic response, this is just multitasking. Can you turn and talk at the same time? Muscle memory kind of aids with that. Any questions on that area?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay. And then you go into the types of practice you can do with your student.
Do you know anything about learning plateaus before we move on to types of practice?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Learning plateaus are inevitable. Everyone has it. You just thrown so much information at you. Sometimes you need to take a break and go back to the basics. Change up the lesson plan if they're stuck. Maybe come back to it at a later time when they're not thinking about that, or doing different types of approaches to make a certain situation click for them. So that's how you can counteract learning plateaus.
Okay, perfect.
Good? Okay.
Now moving on.
Types of practice. There's use acronym DBR. Deliberate, blocked, and random. Deliberate would be going out and briefing the student on the ground. We're going to do steep turns, power on, power off stalls today. And you actually go out and do that in that order, or whatever order. You practice those with specific intent to do that maneuver. Blocked would be something more of like going out and doing 1,000 things of short field, soft field takeoffs. And that's great, but in those weather conditions, you're only learning it for that day. So block practice after the first 4 or 5 times going around the pattern, doing a soft field or short field landing, you're not really paying attention to anything else. You're just going through the motions, and you're learning how to do that maneuver for that day. Weather is always changing, and you got to keep that in mind when you're training students. Random is really good. Say if you're doing a CHECKRIDE prep and you're doing the same order and over and over of the CHECKRIDE. Well, what if on the CHECKRIDE the check airman doesn't go by the same order you did, and now the student's all messed up? So you want to keep the student on their toes. This goes into scenario-based training as well. You're not always going to have a specific order for everything. Things happen. They just do. So
it's called real life.
Yeah, real life scenarios. So that's that with types of practice. Any questions on that? Okay, moving on to scenario-based training. This kind of goes into the random that we just talked about. Your scenario-based training, you want to have clear objectives and you want to tailor this training to the student. So if someone's just starting out, maybe not coming up with something out of their reach where they don't understand what's going on. A good example of this would be telling them on their first cross country to plan me a trip from Sanford to Ocala, and all of a sudden weather rolls in. You tell them, where should we go for a diversion? They can come up with different scenarios and places to go. There's no right or wrong answer, but there might be a better option based on where they could be. This develops HOTS and decision-making skills, and it really helps the student fully understand things that could happen in real life. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, moving on to errors. Everyone makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. So you're gonna have errors. There's two different types of errors. There's slips and mistakes. A slip is when you mean to do something, but you end up doing something else. So instead of pulling back on the throttle, you pull back on the mixture. I slipped up, I pulled the mixture. The mistake would be trying to do something wrong and you successfully do it. So an example of that would be trying to do a short field takeoff and not putting any flaps, and you end up doing a short field takeoff with no flaps, and you did it wrong with intent to do it wrong.
Yeah.
So you didn't know.
You thought that was the way it was supposed to be. Yeah.
Instead of asking. And we can use this acronym to mitigate those errors. Dr. Colt. You can develop routines, flows, after landing checklist flows, pre-maneuver checklist flows. This can really point out where you might be messing up, or if you're skipping over something, that can pinpoint where error could be occurring. This is, I'm sorry, I forgot this one. Raising awareness. Raising awareness. This is changes in your behavior or your flows. Never go out of order if you have a checklist. Checklists are made from blood, and that goes into the next one. Checklists. Checklists are made from blood for a reason. They don't just put it on there just to make you have a bad day, you know, because it was someone else's bad day or even death.
Yeah.
So, use checklists. You want to use reminders as well. So, like our heading bug, altitude bugs, those are great reminders when we might be focusing on something else, but the reminder of the heading bug or altitude bug, it keeps us in the loop of not missing the turn or not climbing. So that's really good. With that. And of course, with learning and practice, you can minimize errors as well. Sorry, I know how to spell.
I realize how bad I do at spelling when I'm put on the spot.
I know.
Oh, I spelled that.
Learning and practice, obviously the more times you do something correct, you will not stray away and do something in the wrong order. Just minimizes those risks. And another big one is taking your time. Slow is fast. You don't want to rush through a maneuver because you're probably going to mess it up. And that's happened to me a couple times. So just take your time with everything and fully think about what you're doing before you do it. That's it for
that.
errors.
The taking time could even be going back to your checklist, not rushing through, just doing each line item of the checklist, you know? Because I remember one time it's like, oh, I'll move the plane, Tom, you go into the restaurant, and then I was trying to hurry up without a checklist, couldn't figure out why I couldn't get the thing started, and never put the mixture forward.
Yeah.
That was that smells brand new though. And I realized the importance of a checklist right there.
Yeah. You know? So that is it with that one. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Moving on to memory and forgetting. There's 3 different types of memory. Sensory memory is kind of how we perform perceptions. Again, use your 5 senses, and it'll commit those memories or perceptions that you're gathering from your senses to memory. Sensory memory is not really long term, it's very short term. So you can use your senses to recognize the stall warning horns go off, but 20 minutes later, if you ask me when the stall warning horn goes off, I'm not going to tell you. I don't know. That goes into short-term memory. Short-term memory is like a scratch pad memory. You can only fit so much on a little sheet to remember, and short-term memory usually lasts between like 30 seconds to even a minute at some point. So with that leads to long-term memory. This is more like permanent storage of information. You really store it in the back of your head. You can recall upon it. later on. And this is for however long your life expectancy is, whatever is long-term memory. Forgetting is another part of this section as well. So retrieval failure is the tip of the tongue phenomenon. It's when you remember it, but you have to have something to recall or jog your memory on how to say and how to spit it out. So that would be retrieval failure. Fading goes into more of you used something a long time ago, but now you don't remember how to do it. So you can use speaking Spanish. I took Spanish classes in high school. I can't tell you anything other than hola. And adios now, because I don't use it. So that memory kind of fades away. Interference, this is a common one. Common example people use when you're first starting with a student, they try to move the ailerons to taxi. They get that from driving. So you gotta say, hey dummy, no, your rudders control the taxi. Repression is unconscious and suppression is conscious. So that this would be like pushing the memory back in your head you don't want to remember, or your body says it was too traumatic for you to remember, so they're gonna suppress it anyways. So example of this would be like going up and doing power off stalls with a new student. You get uncoordinated, you get into a spin, and then you get on the ground and you try to brief them on what went wrong and what we should do next time. And they're like, what are you talking about? That they experienced this PTSD type memory and they completely blocked out because it was too traumatic. So that's repression. Any questions on that?
No.
Moving on to retention of learning, this means that if they're able to recall what you just went over, either it was yesterday or a week ago, you want to make sure as an instructor that you're teaching thoroughly and with meaning in order for that memory to stick with them. So praise, you can use praise, positive reinforcement, compliments. Again, these students, when you first start, they look at you like a god. Like you want to praise them for doing good jobs, so they want to keep doing good things. This goes into behaviors, and again, they kind of relate. Recall is promoted by association, so you can use acronyms like this. If you just tell me to spit out what this means, without the acronym, I might not be able to do it. So recall is promoted by association, and acronyms associating concepts together to make it really concrete and make sense for them. And with this, you also want to have a favorable attitude as an instructor. Nobody wants to be around a negative Nancy. You're just going to bring their overall morale down, their self-concept. They're going to go through the motions going, oh, that was horrible. I don't want to do this again. So remain positive for them. Use all 5 of your senses to fully perceive and form these perceptions in order to learn. Again, with the acronyms, you can use that in order to aid recall. You want to have meaningful repetition of certain maneuvers. You don't want to just go out, be blasting out in the pattern and have no care in the world or what you're doing. So you want to have meaning. Why are they doing this time? Okay, maybe you struggled with this last time, let's work on it. Maybe that's why you're doing it so many times. So that is it for, where did this go? Retention of learning. Last one, transfer of learning. This is how you go from one context to the next. So positive transfer, you have to have skill A and it helps skill B later on. So positive transfer of learning would be something like going out and doing slow flight and have them later on come out to the pattern and do a short field landing. They are more comfortable going at such a low speed. So that is a positive transfer. They're making that connection. Okay, I should be coming in slow because I'm trying to stop right when I touch down, you know, because there's a short runway. Negative transfer, this would be skill A hurts skill B. So again, taxiing with ailerons instead of the rudder, that could be a negative transfer. Or maybe an airline pilot like yourself, going back to general aviation aircraft, and you haven't flown a Cessna in 10 years, you're going to land it like you would a 737. That would be a negative transfer. Building blocks. This is skill A needs to be learned before skill B. So when you're about to solo a student, obviously you want to go out and do turns, climbs, and descents before you solo them in the pattern. They could put 2 and 2 together. You have to learn this before you can do this. And that is it for building blocks and task B. Any questions?
No, good job. That definitely would pass.
Yeah.